Good evening, or good morning, I suppose. I've been telling people one or the other on this shift for 25 years, and I still don't know which one fits this late. This is Field Notes, WGRY 91.3 out of Greyford. I'm Edward Hollis. River's settling itself. There were a couple of weeks this spring where you could hear it from the parking lot walking in. Runoff coming down loud out of the marrow. That's done now. The flies are still as bad as they've been, but the leaves have come the rest of the way in. You walk past the trees and you can't see through them anymore. That short stretch is over. Until October. I had a letter in, 2 weeks ago, maybe a little more, from a woman I don't know, addressed to the show. No return address on the envelope, just a first name at the bottom of the last page. I'm not going to read you the name. She didn't ask me not to, but she also didn't ask me to. I read the letter the night it came, and again the next morning before I went into work, and I've had it on my desk since. I want to say something about that before I read it. I get a fair number of letters here. Some I read on the air and some I don't. And that's a decision I make night to night, and I don't always know on what grounds I make it. Sometimes a letter comes in and I know I'll never read it. It isn't mine to read. It's somebody's working through, on paper, of a thing they needed to say to anyone, and I was the address that came to hand. Those go in the drawer. Sometimes a letter comes in and I read it the next week. No thinking required, because it's a piece of something I've been hearing about for 30 years, and the writer happens to have a clean way of saying it. Those are easy. Then there are the ones I sit with, the ones I take home, where I'm not deciding whether the writer is telling the truth. That's almost never the question, but whether the telling is mine to do, and whether I can do it the way it deserves. This is one of those. I've decided I'll read it to you tonight. I won't read all of it. The words are hers, and the telling has to be mine, the way these things usually work between me and a correspondent. I'll paraphrase the bulk. I'll quote her where it matters. I'll skip the parts that are hers to keep. What she's writing about happened to her family this spring, the last couple months. She's not from here. She's been here a little under a year. They lost their dog. That isn't the whole of it, but it is where I'd start if she'd asked me, and it's where she starts. So I'll start there too. The family moved up here last fall, from Worcester, down in central Massachusetts. 3-hour drive from Greyford if you don't stop, which most people do on the way in. They'd been talking about it for years, she writes. Wanted out of where they were. Older house, bigger yard, the kids in better schools. The husband had taken early retirement of some kind. She doesn't say from what, and I'm not going to guess. They put in an offer on a place south of Greyford in August, and they were moved in by the end of October. Now, she does the thing I do myself when I write up new ground. She tells you what the place was supposed to be. The farmhouse the realtor showed them, the 2 acres, the road, the view of the trees out the kitchen window, which she says was what sold her, the kids' rooms upstairs, the husband's idea of a workshop in the barn. She doesn't say what made the place cheap. She wouldn't know to. I know that road. I won't say I know the house because I don't, but I know the kind of place. South of Greyford, out where the highway runs past the fire road, hardwood out the back coming up to the property line, the woods going further than you can see. There are a few of those houses. They tend to come on the market a little under what they go for 10 miles in the other direction, and the people selling don't always tell you why, and the people buying, if they're not from here, don't always think to ask. Locals know, they don't say. The dog was theirs from before they moved. His name was Cooper, 6 years old. She doesn't say what kind, only that he was a big dog. The kids could lean on him, was how she put it. He'd grown up with the children. The daughter was 5 when they got him. She was 11 by the time of this letter. Cooper was the kind of dog who didn't have a separate life from the family. He went where they went. He slept at the foot of one bed or another. She mentions in passing that he'd taken to the new place, that he liked the woods, that he had room to run for the first time, that he'd been a city dog his whole life, and now he wasn't. She writes this almost as an aside, the kind of detail a person includes because it was true, and because at the time she wrote it down, it still mattered to her that it had been true. It was an afternoon back in April, she writes, late afternoon, the part of the day where the light comes down low through the trees and turns the floor of the woods a color I won't name. She didn't either. You've seen it, or you haven't. She'd been at the kitchen window, washing something at the sink. The window looks out over the backyard, the lawn ending where the woods begin, 20 yards of grass, and then nothing but hardwood. The leaves weren't out yet, late April, still bare, or close to it. She saw something in the trees. That's how she puts it, something. It wasn't a deer. She'd seen deer in those trees most mornings, and what she saw wasn't a deer, was the only thing she could say with confidence. Too big, or too small, or the wrong shape between the trees. She gives all three over the course of a paragraph and then says she doesn't know. That's correct. The honest way to write down something glimpsed at a distance, in late daylight, in the trees, is to admit you couldn't fix the shape of it. The people who give you a clean description of a thing they saw in the woods are usually wrong about what they saw, or wrong about having seen it at all. The ones who say, "I couldn't tell you what it was," are the ones I trust. Cooper was at the back door before she'd quite worked out what she was looking at. That's the order she gives, and I'll trust her on it. Though I'll note that a dog usually knows a thing is wrong before the person does. It's a notice you take by feel, not by looking. He stood at the door and he wanted out. Not barking, that's another detail she's specific about. Cooper barked at things. He didn't bark at this. Whining low, pawing at the door. The kind of urgent that wasn't excitement, wasn't fear exactly. She couldn't name it. She said so. She opened the door to calm him. You open a door for a dog who wants out of a house. You've done it 10,000 times. You don't think about it. The dog was past her before the door was all the way open. She says she felt him go before she saw him. She felt the air move, the way you feel a person walk past you in the dark when you can't see them. Then he was in the yard. Then he was through the yard. Then he was in the trees. She called him. She called him by name, and he didn't come. And she said his name again, twice, 3 times, and he didn't slow. Then she couldn't see him anymore. She stood on the back step. She doesn't say how long. She says it was longer than it felt and shorter than she thought afterward, which is exactly how it works. The mind doesn't run on a watch when something is happening it doesn't have a category for. She stood on the step. She called his name a few more times. The light kept coming down. The flies were on her, and she noticed them, and then she didn't. She was thinking, and this is in the letter, and I'm grateful for it, because most people don't write down what they were thinking at moments like this. She was thinking that she'd go after him. She was thinking that any minute now she'd step off the step and start across the lawn. She didn't. She stood on the step. Then she heard something. I'm going to quote her, because I want you to hear it the way she wrote it down. I heard something. I couldn't tell you what it was. It wasn't his bark, and it wasn't anything I'd heard before. That's all she says about the sound. The next sentence in the letter is, I went back inside. I read those 4 sentences together when the letter came, and I sat with them for an hour. She went back inside. She did not go into the trees. She doesn't make a thing of it in the letter. She writes it like it's the natural next thing a person does when they hear something in the woods they don't have a name for. It isn't natural. Not for a woman whose dog just went into the trees and isn't coming back to her calls. The natural thing is to take 3 more steps, then 6, then to be at the tree line, then to be a few feet in. That's how it goes when you've been raised somewhere there isn't anything in the woods worth worrying about. She didn't. She went inside. She shut the door, and she stood on the kitchen tile with her back against it for some minutes. That's her detail, some minutes. She didn't time it. Until the kids came home from school, and the husband came home from town a little later, and the family started realizing what had happened. She didn't know she'd done something locals do. She did it anyway. The hot stove. She'd never been told it was hot. She knew it anyway. I want to put a pin in that and come back. For now, the dog was gone. The light kept going. The kids came home, the husband came home, and the family was in the house looking out the windows at the trees. The first few days I won't dwell on. You can imagine them. The family did what there was to do. They drove the roads around the property looking. They walked the edges of the yard. The husband went up and down the highway both ways, 3 times the first day, twice the second. They put up posters at the gas station, at the diner, at the little store down the road from their place. They called the animal shelter in Greyford. The kids kept on, school, home, the yard before dinner and after, calling his name from the back step. She writes that nobody went into the woods. She doesn't make a thing of that either. She mentions, in 1 sentence, that the husband walked the edges of the woods on the second day. Walk the edges, not in, is how she puts it. And the kids she kept out of the backyard after sundown. That's all she gives on the matter. She doesn't write down why nobody went in. She doesn't say if it was the sound or if it was something else by then. People who have crossed over into knowing a thing tend to act as if they always knew it, and they don't bother to footnote the change. 4 days. Then he was at the front door. That's not where they were looking. He'd run off the back. They'd been watching the backyard, the woods, the side fence. He came around the house and sat down at the front door. She heard him scratch at it the way he scratched at it when he wanted in. Once, twice, soft, and she opened it and he came in. She writes, he came in and lay down on the rug in the front hall the way he always lay down on the rug, like nothing had happened, like he'd been out for 10 minutes. The daughter on the floor with him, the son on the floor with him, the husband down on one knee, hands on the dog's head, looking him over for hurt. There was no hurt, no cut, no limp, no matted fur. The wife says he looked like he'd been brushed. She put it in those words and then went on to the next sentence. The kids were crying. The husband was on the phone calling the gas station to take the posters down. She made the dog a meal, a full bowl, his usual food, plus a piece of leftover chicken from dinner the night before. She set it down. He looked at it. He didn't move toward it. She said his name. He looked up at her. He didn't go to the bowl. The husband said he's just tired. The wife wrote, and I'll read you the exact line because she came back to it later, I should have known then. I think I did know. I just didn't have anything to do with knowing. That's the relief beat done. I'll take the rest of it slowly because she does. And because what she's doing in the letter from this point on is recording, not interpreting, recording what it's like to keep a dog you've loved for 6 years in the house after it stops being that dog. The first night. The 4 of them went to bed sometime after 11. Cooper used to sleep at the foot of the daughter's bed, or the son's, depending on the night. He didn't go upstairs. They left him on the rug in the front hall where he wanted to be. Around 3 in the morning, the wife got up to use the bathroom. She does say what time it was because she looked at the clock. And on her way back to bed, she walked past the head of the stairs and looked down into the front hall, and Cooper wasn't on the rug. He was at the door, sitting up, facing the door, looking out the glass at the trees. She watched him for a minute. He didn't move. He didn't notice her. He was looking out the door, into the dark of the yard and the woods past it, the way a person looks at a thing they're considering. She went back to bed. She didn't wake the husband. She lay there for a while. The next morning, she told him. He'd heard her get up, but hadn't heard her on the stairs the second time. She said Cooper was at the door at 3 in the morning, just sitting, looking out. The husband said, "Honey, he was probably remembering being out there. The poor guy, give him some time." She said, "I know." She didn't say what she didn't know, because she didn't have words for it yet. The husband had words, and his were probably right, and she wasn't ready to argue against a thing she couldn't counter. But Cooper was at the door the next night, too, and the night after. And every night that week that the wife happened to be up to see, and she found around night 4 or 5 that she was getting up to check on purpose, just to see if he was there. He was always there, the same posture, the same direction, looking out into the dark. She started leaving the hall light off so she could see his outline in the door glass without him noticing her on the stairs. He didn't notice her anyway. She doesn't think he ever did. The eating, she writes, came on slowly, which is why nobody picked up on it the first few days. The bowl was emptied at night. Sometime, they assumed he was eating it. They weren't standing over him. He'd always been a dog who ate when he was hungry and didn't when he wasn't. She started watching. Around day 3 after he came back, she saw him at the bowl, mid-afternoon, no one else home. He stood over it. He didn't lower his head. He stood there for half a minute, looking at the food the way a person looks at a meal they're not going to eat. Then he walked away. She started measuring. The first day she measured, he'd eaten about half the cup. The next day, a quarter. The next day she watched him, and he didn't eat any of it. The bowl sat full all day. He drank water. That part stayed normal, she's specific. He just didn't eat. She tried his favorite. He had a particular treat. She'd kept a bag of them in the cabinet over the refrigerator since they moved up here, because his favorite was something she had to drive to a particular store in Greyford to buy, and she made the trip once a month with a list of other errands. She held one out to him in her palm in the kitchen, the way she'd done 1,000 times. He came to her. He took it. He held it in his mouth for a second, then he set it down on the kitchen floor between his paws. And he looked up at her. She writes that he looked up at her like he was sorry. And he didn't eat it. He stood there with the treat between his paws, looking up at her, and after a moment he turned around and walked away, and the treat stayed on the kitchen floor where he'd set it. She left it there for an hour and a half before she picked it up. She doesn't say why she left it there. The next thing she noticed alone. She noticed it before the husband did. And that's a piece of the texture of this letter. The wife saw the wrongness before anybody else did, and she was the one to call it the wrongness in her own head before she had any word for it. She'd been calling him by name his whole life. Cooper, that word, for 6 years. He'd lift his head every time, or thump his tail, or look up, that mechanism that's wired into a dog and a name. She noticed around a week after he came back that he wasn't lifting his head when she said his name anymore. He came when she whistled. He came when she clapped, when she opened the back door, when she shook the leash. He looked up if she spoke, if she said anything, any word in his direction. But the name, the actual word Cooper, said to him by anyone in the house, he did not respond to. It took her 3 days of testing to be sure. She tested it without thinking she was testing it. Then she tested it deliberately. He didn't know the name. Or, she writes this carefully, he didn't choose to know it. She wasn't able to tell which. She told the husband. He said he hadn't noticed and started watching. After a day, he came back to her. You're right. I see what you mean. We should take him to a vet. There could be something neurological. She said yes. They did not take him to a vet. She doesn't say why. The last thing I'll tell you in this part of the letter happened about 10 days after Cooper came back to the door. They were in the living room. It was evening, early evening, the wife says. Light still in the windows. The husband was reading. She was sewing something. The kids were on the floor. The dog was at the door. By then he was at the door most of the time he was awake, watching the woods, day or night. The kids were used to it. The son said, "Mom, why is he looking at me like that?" She looked up. The dog had turned. He wasn't at the door anymore. He was standing in the middle of the living room rug, facing the family, and he was looking at the son. The husband looked up from his book. The daughter looked up from the floor. The dog looked at each of them in turn. The son, the daughter, the husband, the wife. A few seconds on each face, and when he'd been through all of them, he started over. She writes that they all agreed about it afterward. They all said the same thing in different words. The husband said it was like he was trying to remember being a dog. The daughter said he looked at me like he didn't know who I was, but he was sorry about it. The son said he looked at me like he knew my name. The husband said he's still working through it. The wife wrote in the letter, "I knew right then. I knew, and I didn't say anything, because if I'd said it, I'd have had to say what it was, and I didn't have what it was. I still don't." That's where she leaves it in my reading. The next part of the letter is the morning at the bottom of the stairs, and I'm going to take that on its own. So, Cooper at the door, Cooper not eating, Cooper not answering, Cooper looking at them like he was working out which one of them was the son, and the family living around it, because what else is there? It was a few nights after the look. She doesn't pin the date. I think she'd stopped counting by then. I would have. She woke up. That's how she puts it. I woke up. I don't know why. I just woke up. She lay there for some minutes, listening, and there was nothing to listen to. The house was quiet. The kids were asleep. The husband was breathing the way he breathed. She couldn't get back to sleep, so she got out of bed and went down for a glass of water. She didn't turn on a light. She knew the house. She'd been up in the night before. She went down by feel and by memory in a house she'd been in long enough to know it in the dark. She came down to the foot of the stairs and she turned to go toward the kitchen. Cooper was in the front hallway. He was sitting, up straight, facing the bottom of the stairs, looking up. She'd come around the newel post and he was right there in the middle of the floor between the staircase and the front door, sitting upright, his head tilted back and his eyes on the top of the stairs. She takes it slow here. I'll give it to you the way she had it. I stopped on the bottom step. He didn't see me. He was looking past me. I said his name. He didn't move. I said his name again. He didn't move. I stepped down. I moved in front of him, so I was between him and what he was looking at. He tilted his head a little to the side, around me, to keep looking, like I wasn't there. I said his name a third time. He didn't move. She doesn't write what she felt at this point. I'm not going to guess for her. Some things shouldn't be guessed for somebody. What she did was this. She went to the back door in the kitchen and she opened it. She stood in the doorway for a few seconds. The backyard was dark, early, an hour or more before light. Cooper didn't come. She turned and walked back through the kitchen, past him in the hallway, still sitting, still looking up, and she opened the front door. She stood there. The road was empty. Cooper didn't come. She closed the front door quietly so she wouldn't wake anyone. She walked back to the foot of the stairs. He was still looking up. She went upstairs. She did not wake the husband. She did not check on the kids. She went into the bedroom, and she did not get back into bed. She sat in the chair by the window and looked out at the back field, which was just starting to be visible in the dark. She sat there, by her count, about 20 minutes. I'll tell you what I think she was doing. She was waiting to be sure. When she went back down, he was gone. The hall was empty. The front door was closed the way she'd left it. The back door was closed the way she'd left it. She didn't check the rest of the house. She writes that she knew, standing at the foot of the stairs, that she didn't need to. He was gone. He was not coming back. That's the last anybody in that family saw of Cooper. She closes the letter with 3 lines, more or less. I'll give them to you the way she put them, because we're past the point where my paraphrase serves. I don't know what came back to our door 4 days after he went into the trees. I want you to know I'm careful with that sentence. I am not saying it wasn't him. I am saying I don't know. I miss our dog. I miss the one from before. I don't know when exactly the dog we had stopped being there. I'm writing to you because I had to write to somebody, and I picked you. That's the letter. I read a lot of letters at this desk over the years that I haven't known what to do with. Most of them I put away. I haven't with this one. She's written somebody who could tell her there's a rule, and I can't. I have rules for some of it. I gave you the rule about voices in the trees the other night I was on. I have rules about names, and rules about roads, and rules about which doors you open after dark. I have not got, in any notebook I keep, a rule for the family of somebody, of something taken into the woods. If there is one, I don't know it. If I knew it, I'm not sure I'd be the man to teach it. She did what a person can do. She didn't follow in. She heard the sound and she went inside. She kept the family in the house. When the thing in the front hall stopped being something she could do anything for, she went upstairs and sat at the window for 20 minutes, and she gave it the time to be gone. I don't know if that was right. I know it was what could be done. So, if you're listening tonight from a house on the edge of these woods, and your dog runs into them and comes back, you'll know. You won't have a word for it either. There's nothing in any of my notebooks I can tell you to do about it. I'm sorry about that. This is Field Notes, WGRY 91.3. I'll be here till 4, with the lights low and the door shut and the static for company. Stay in where it's warm. I'll talk to you tomorrow night.